The husband disappeared. Until she found the truth, on the morning her husband disappeared, nothing felt unusual at first. The sun filtered softly through the thin curtains, casting pale gold lines across the bedroom wall, just like it had every morning for the past 7 years. His side of the bed was still warm, the faint imprint of his body lingering in the sheets, as if he had only stepped away for a moment. She assumed he was in the kitchen, maybe rushing through breakfast before work, tapping nervously on his phone the way he always did when he was late. But as the minutes passed, an unsettling silence began to press against her chest. No clinking of dishes, no footsteps, no familiar hum of his voice. When she finally walked into the kitchen, she found his coffee half-poured, cold and untouched, the mug resting beneath the machine as if time itself had stopped mid-action. That was the first moment she felt it, the quiet dread that would soon consume her entire life. She tried calling his phone, once at first, then again and again, her thumb trembling more with every unanswered ring. It went straight to voicemail. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe his battery had died. Maybe he'd forgotten it at home. But when she checked the counter, his phone wasn't there. Neither were his keys. His wallet was gone too. Everything he would need to disappear was missing, yet everything he loved had been left behind. His jacket still hung by the door. His favorite shoes were neatly aligned beneath the rack. Even his watch, the one he never took off, lay abandoned on the nightstand. It was as if he had walked out of their life in a hurry, choosing only what was necessary and leaving the rest without a second thought. That realization sent a sharp chill down her spine, one she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. By nightfall, panic had replaced denial. Friends came over, their voices low and cautious, eyes filled with sympathy that felt premature and terrifying. The police asked questions that felt invasive yet painfully insufficient. Did he seem unhappy? Was the marriage stable? Had he mentioned leaving? Each question felt like a quiet accusation, forcing her to relive every argument, every awkward silence, every moment she had dismissed as ordinary stress. She answered honestly, she thought they were happy, or at least stable. There had been no goodbye, no note, no warning. The officers scribbled in their notebooks, exchanged glances, and told her the same thing everyone else did. Adults sometimes leave, sometimes they choose to disappear. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true, not him. Not without a word. Not without a reason far darker than she could imagine. Days turned into weeks, and the house slowly transformed into a museum of absence. Every room echoed with memories she couldn't escape. His favorite chair remained untouched. His clothes still smelled like him, a cruel reminder that he had existed, that he had been real. At night, she lay awake listening to the ticking clock, replaying the last conversation they'd had. It was ordinary, too ordinary. He had kissed her forehead, told her he loved her, and promised to be home early. That promise became a wound that never healed. People stopped calling as often, life around her continued, indifferent to her suffering. And in the silence that followed, questions began to grow, questions she was terrified to ask, yet even more terrified to leave unanswered. It was during one of those quiet, suffocating nights that she noticed something she had overlooked before. A folder tucked away in his old laptop, hidden beneath layers of mundane files, labeled with a name she didn't recognize. Her hands shook as she clicked it open, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure she could hear it in her ears. Inside were documents, emails, and photographs that made her breath catch. Numbers that didn't make sense, names she'd never heard, locations he'd never mentioned. In that moment, she realized the truth was far more complicated and far more dangerous than a simple disappearance. Her husband hadn't just vanished. He had been living a life she knew nothing about. And whatever secret he was hiding, it was only beginning to reveal itself. The deeper she searched, the more the image of the man she loved began to fracture. The emails were written in a tone she had never heard him use before, cold, calculated, and deliberate. He spoke in coded language, referencing transactions, deadlines, and meetings in distant cities he had never mentioned. Some messages were marked urgent, others encrypted, their contents unreadable without passwords she didn't have. Yet even without understanding everything, she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. This was not a harmless secret or a forgotten side project. Whatever he had been involved in was organized, structured, and dangerous. As she scrolled, her mind raced through memories, reinterpreting moments she had once brushed aside, the late nights, the sudden business trips, the constant need for privacy. Each memory twisted into something darker, something she could no longer deny. Among the files, she found photographs that chilled her to the core. They showed her husband standing beside people she didn't recognize, in places that felt foreign and hostile. His posture was different, rigid, alert, like someone constantly watching his surroundings. In one photo, his reflection stared back at her through a dark window, eyes hollow, distant, nothing like the man who used to laugh beside her at the dinner table. The timestamps on the images overlapped with days he had sworn he was at work, late nights he claimed were filled with meetings and paperwork, lies layered upon lies. The man she thought she knew began to dissolve, replaced by a stranger who had shared her bed, her home, her life. And the most terrifying thought of all was not that he had lied, but that she had never questioned him. The bank statements confirmed her worst fears. Accounts she had never seen before, transfers moving in and out in amounts too large to be ignored. Money flowing through offshore banks, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, papers spread out before her like evidence in a trial she never asked to attend. Her hands trembled as she traced the numbers, trying to understand how long this had been going on. Years, maybe more. Their comfortable life, the home they built together, the security she believed in, all of it suddenly felt stolen, fragile, possibly funded by something illegal. She wondered if loving him had made her complicit without her knowing. That thought alone was enough to make her stomach twist with guilt and fear. As the nights grew longer, so did her paranoia. Every unfamiliar car outside her house made her heart race. Every unexpected sound felt like a warning. She stopped sleeping, afraid that closing her eyes would leave her vulnerable. The police had called once, then twice, but they offered no new information. Officially, her husband was still considered missing. Unofficially, she sensed they knew more than they were willing to share. Their questions became sharper, more pointed. Had he ever mentioned foreign contacts? Did he use aliases? Was there anyone who might want him gone? Each question pushed her further into a truth she wasn't ready to face. Her husband hadn't just disappeared, he may have been running. Or worse, hiding from something that could now be watching her too. The moment everything changed came unexpectedly. A single email arrived late one night, sent from an untraceable address, containing just one sentence: "Stop looking, or you'll regret it." No name, no explanation, just a threat. Her breath caught as she stared at the screen, her heart pounding so violently it felt painful. Someone knew she was digging. Someone was watching her every move. The fear she had been holding back finally spilled over, sharp and overwhelming. But beneath it, something else ignited: anger, determination. If her husband had disappeared willingly, she needed to know why. And if he had been forced to vanish, then the truth was far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Either way, she realized she was already too deep to turn back now. From that night on, fear became a constant companion. She started noticing details she once ignored: a black car parked across the street for hours, the faint echo of footsteps behind her when she walked home from the store, the subtle hum on the phone line whenever she made a call. It felt as though her life had turned into a silent interrogation, one where the questions were asked without words. She tried to convince herself it was paranoia, a natural response to trauma, but deep down she knew better. The warning email had not been a bluff. Someone was monitoring her, measuring her resolve, waiting to see if fear would silence her curiosity. And yet, every attempt to intimidate her only fueled her need to uncover what her husband had been hiding. Driven by desperation, she reached out to the one person she had avoided since the disappearance, her husband's younger brother. They had never been close, bound together only by polite conversations during holidays and family gatherings. But when she mentioned the files, the money, and the threat, his reaction was immediate and alarming. His voice dropped, and a long silence followed before he spoke again. He told her there were things she didn't want to know, truths better left buried. When she pressed him, he finally admitted that her husband had been involved with people who didn't forgive mistakes. People who erased problems instead of solving them. That was when she realized the disappearance might not have been an escape, but a calculated move to survive. Her husband's brother revealed fragments of a past she had never been told about: failed deals, dangerous alliances, and a betrayal that had marked him as a liability. According to him, disappearing was sometimes the only option when debts were not measured in money, but in loyalty and silence. She listened, stunned, as the image of her husband shifted once again. Not a villain, not a victim, but something far more complex. A man trapped by choices he made long before she entered his life. The question that haunted her was simple and devastating. Had he disappeared to protect himself, or to protect her? That night, she returned home with a heavy sense of dread, only to find her front door slightly open. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, every instinct screaming for her to run. Nothing was stolen, nothing appeared disturbed. Except for one thing. On the kitchen table lay a single object, her husband's watch. The same watch she remembered seeing on the nightstand the morning he vanished, cold, silent, placed deliberately in the center of the table, as if to make sure she couldn't miss it. The message was clear. He was alive, and someone wanted her to know it. As she stared at the watch, memories flooded back, the way he used to glance at it when he was nervous, how he twisted it around his wrist when he was thinking. Tears blurred her vision, but they were quickly replaced by resolve. This was no longer about unanswered questions or broken promises. This was about survival, about understanding the truth before it destroyed her. Whoever was behind this wanted control, wanted to dictate how far she could go. But leaving the watch behind had made one fatal mistake. It had proven that her husband's disappearance was not the end of the story, but the beginning of something far darker. From that moment on, she stopped pretending she was safe. The watch was not a symbol of comfort, it was a warning. Someone had entered her home effortlessly, without leaving a trace, just to remind her how exposed she truly was. She changed her routines, avoided familiar places, and stopped answering unknown calls. Sleep became impossible. Each night, she sat in the dark, listening for sounds that didn't belong, replaying every choice that had led her here. She realized that whatever her husband had been involved in wasn't over simply because he had vanished. The consequences were still unfolding, and now they were centered on her. Unable to trust the police and too afraid to face this alone, she turned to a private investigator recommended by an old friend. He was cautious, methodical, and disturbingly calm when she explained everything. When she showed him the emails, the bank transfers, and the watch, his expression hardened. He told her the truth she had been avoiding. This was not a missing person case. It was a containment operation. Someone had invested too much to allow loose ends. And she, unknowingly, had become the most dangerous loose end of all. The investigator warned her that searching for the truth might provoke a response far worse than silence. As the investigation progressed, a name surfaced again and again, buried within financial records and encrypted communications. A man her husband once described casually as a business partner. In reality, he was something else entirely, a broker of secrets, a manipulator who thrived on leverage and fear. According to the investigator, this man didn't destroy people directly. He erased them socially, financially, and emotionally until disappearing became their only escape. Her husband hadn't just crossed him, he had tried to leave. And leaving was something this man never allowed. The investigator uncovered proof that her husband was still alive, barely. Sightings placed him moving through border cities under false identities, never staying long enough to be traced. He was running, constantly, not toward freedom, but away from punishment. What shocked her most was the final detail, the watch. It hadn't been placed by her husband, it had been placed by the man hunting him. A calculated act meant to lure her into silence, or into a mistake. She finally understood. She was not a victim by coincidence. She was bait. Then came the message that shattered any remaining illusion of control. Her phone buzzed with a location pin and a single line of text. If you want answers, come alone. The investigator begged her not to go, warning her that this was exactly what they wanted. But she knew refusing would not protect her. The truth had already wrapped itself around her life, tightening with every passing day. If she wanted this nightmare to end, if she wanted to know whether the man she loved still existed beneath the lies, she would have to walk directly into the trap that had been waiting for her all along. The location led her to an abandoned industrial district at the edge of the city, a place forgotten by time and avoided by anyone with common sense. Rusted warehouses stood like silent witnesses, their broken windows staring back at her as she stepped out of the car. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of oil and decay. Every instinct told her to turn back, but she kept walking, her heart pounding louder with each step. This was the moment everything had been leading to. Whatever waited for her inside would finally explain the lies, the disappearance, and the man she had loved, or confirm that he was gone forever. Inside the warehouse, shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, distorted by flickering lights overhead. A voice echoed through the vast space, calm and confident, addressing her by name. The man stepped forward slowly, his presence commanding without force. He spoke as if they were old friends, explaining that her husband had been valuable once, skilled, intelligent, useful, but value faded when loyalty cracked. According to him, her husband had tried to disappear without permission, believing love could free him from obligations forged long before their marriage. That mistake, the man said softly, had consequences that could not be undone. Then her husband emerged from the shadows, thin, bruised, alive. The sight of him shattered her composure, emotions crashing over her all at once, relief, anger, heartbreak, and fear. He couldn't meet her eyes at first. When he finally did, the truth was written clearly across his face. He admitted everything. The secrets, the crimes, the deals he had made to protect their future, convinced he could walk away once they had enough. He had disappeared not because he stopped loving her, but because staying would have put her directly in the crosshairs. Running, he believed, was the only way to keep her alive. The man in control watched their reunion with detached amusement. He explained that love was always the weakness that exposed his most valuable assets. People would endure pain for money or power, but they would sacrifice everything for someone they loved. That was why she had been allowed to search, to uncover pieces of the truth. Her determination had proven exactly how much leverage she provided. Now the rules were simple. Her husband could disappear forever, erased completely, and she would be left alone, untouched. Or he could return one last time, fix the problem he created, and pay the debt in full. As the choice hung in the air, she understood the cruel symmetry of it all. The disappearance had never been about escape. It had been about delay, time borrowed, not freedom earned. Her husband looked at her, silently apologizing for the life he had dragged her into. In that moment, she realized the truth was not just about who he had been, but about who he would choose to be now. Whatever decision was made next would end the story they once shared, and begin something neither of them could ever undo.